What do you do when you have a Congress that won't play ball, an economy stuck in neutral, and an opponent who's proving frustratingly difficult to take down? Try to get by with a little help from your friends. It's Monday, June 4th, and this is Now. Joining me today, MSNBC political analyst and Georgetown University professor Michael Eric Dyson. Jonathan Chait of New York Magazine joins the program. MSNBC contributor and queen bee of thegrio.com, Joy Ann Reid. And the inimitable Jimmy Williams, also an MSNBC contributor. I totally messed up your Chiron. This week, the Obama campaign appears to be second-guessing itself after absorbing a heavy blow dealt by Friday's jobs report. Supporters of the president found an email from campaign manager Jim Messina in their inbox last night titled Your Feedback. It read, "We want to know from you what's working, what we could be doing better, what you care about, and what you're hearing about the president and this campaign." Jonathan Chait, since you are new to this little rodeo, I will ask you this first. Regardless of how much the Obama campaign actually takes into consideration the feedback that they get, this would
hopefully
seem to,
very little.
Yeah, well, that's true too. This would seem to point to a campaign that I won't say is rudderless, but perhaps having a hard time figuring out its messaging.
I don't know if that's really true.
Okay, tell me why not.
So look, they've got to define Mitt Romney out of the gate. They've taken steps at that. They've had problems with other Democrats stepping on their message. Bill Clinton being the most recent example. Mm-hmm. But basically they're setting up the message of Mitt Romney. It's a very blunt message, right? He's a rich guy. He doesn't really care about people who aren't rich guys. Mm-hmm. He's a typical Republican. And I think they're going to move that into the he'll take us back to George W. Bush's economic policies frame as the economy goes on. But it seems to be kind of.
But you think that this has sort of always been the strategy to pivot from Bain to the gubernatorial record and onwards?
Look, anytime you've got a known commodity in office, most of the action is going to take place in terms of defining the challenger, right? I mean, everyone knows what they think about Barack Obama. There are very few people who are going to change their minds. Mm-hmm. So the first thing you have to do is change their mind about Mitt Romney or give them something to think about Mitt Romney, because the undecided voters are much more likely not to know what to think about the guy.
There's a lot of head nodding going on behind you with Michael Eric Dyson.
Yeah, I think that's true. And then look, and when is it bad for people to take a kind of temperature of the room, so to speak, to figure out, look, are we getting this right or are we getting this wrong? Rather do it now than later. Rather be on the offensive to say, look, we want to shore up our numbers. We know that the jobs report wasn't as good as we thought, but we can also talk about how it was an improvement, 69,000 jobs added. But also, let's figure out how the president is reading among various constituencies that compete for political interests. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And as Jonathan has said, if all the action is going on redefining who Mitt Romney is, you've also got to get your game plan together, too. To use a basketball metaphor, you got to take what the defense gives you. And when you take what the defense gives you, you begin to, as a point guard, distribute the ball.
But in all fairness, I mean, there have been some it has been a little bit rocky in the last couple of weeks. I will quote a Maureen Dowd op-ed this weekend that says, the president who started off with such dazzle now seems incapable of stimulating either the economy or the voters. There is a new American Crossroads web video out that plays upon the notion that the candidate of change has become the candidate of fear. Jimmy Williams, what do you make of it?
In the South, we have an interesting saying: you attract more flies or more bees with honey than with vinegar. Right. What we know...
I think we have that in the North, too.
Do you have that in the North? See, I thought I was another one of my colloquialisms. Jonathan made a very interesting point, which is the campaign is out there sticking to its guns. I have been saying for the last 2 weeks, I want the Obama campaign to be for something. I think the American public already knows Mitt Romney. They know that he's building a car elevator. They know he has 3 houses. They know his wife owns 2 Cadillacs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's your typical country club Republican. Fine, whatever. That's not a bad thing. We know him. So now what's Barack Obama for? I want to know what he is for. Tell me 3 things. Give me 3 major policy agendas that you're going to put out there and you're going to pass and dare congressmen to do it and run on it. Chris Matthews talked about this morning. I've been saying this for 2 weeks. I want to know what the Obama campaign is for, which echoes 2008, as opposed to what they're against.
The issue, though, is this morning the new ad from Team Obama is an ad about Mitt Romney and Mitt Romney's policies taking the country back. To your point, Noam Scheiber in the New Republic says politically it's still worth flogging the American Jobs Act aggressively. The administration finally grasped this last September after 2.5 years of mostly giving the GOP a pass. But the focus on stimulus has largely given way in recent months to a combination of attacks on Romney's private equity career, along with efforts to tout the Obama record. But you're talking about new policy. Now,
yes.
Joy, we know that nothing's actually going to happen in terms of policy or legislation. So
yeah, and I'm in rare disagreement with Jimmy Williams. Like, I don't disagree with him just by default. Whatever he says, I say. But I disagree. I think the American people know Barack Obama.
Right.
They know his personality. They sort of are used to him now. He's running an 04 strategy, just basically what George W. Bush did, which is define your opponent. And I think most Americans don't really know. They don't pay as close attention as those of us who sort of eat, sleep, and breathe politics do. And people don't really know as much about Mitt Romney as the Obama campaign wants them to. And they've always been preparing to run against Mitt. This has always been their game plan.
Let's take a look at the new ad, because it does have some new imagery. It talks about Mitt Romney outsourcing jobs to call centers in India. Let's take a look at it.
Instead of hiring workers from his own state, Romney outsourced call center jobs to India. He cut taxes for millionaires like himself while raising them on the middle class, and left the state $2.6 billion deeper in debt. So now, when Mitt Romney talks about what he'd do as president,
I know what it takes to create jobs.
Remember, we've heard it all before.
I know how jobs are created.
Okay, Jonathan, can the president continue to do that for the next 5 months?
No, I don't think they're going to do it for 5 months. You do it for a month or two. That's what George W. Bush did to John Kerry in 04. He defined the guy who had a very soft and fluid image among the American people and helped to discredit him as a president. I think that's what they need to do, is to discredit him as someone who can fix the economy.
And then, look, you've got to take it in stages, as Jonathan is suggesting. First of all, you hit him on his weaknesses. Look, he says he can run Bain Capital. He ran it into the ground. And he can't run the economy. And if he's going to do a parallel movement here, it's going to be disastrous. Then you begin to talk about, I think I'll add my rare disagreement with Mr. Williams here, because the public knows who Obama is. The question is, do they know the good stuff that's necessary to fix the problems that they still see looming? That's the question. And I think part of that is communication as well.
Well, not only that, but that ad is not aimed at the national number. That ad is aimed at Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia. It's aimed at certain states where the unemployment rate is persistently high, and where your sort of swing voter, right, that is a middle-class person and worker, they're going to care about that.
Well, it's worth mentioning, though, that the unemployment rate in swing states is actually lower than the national average, which is a good thing for the president, especially with numbers looking the way they are. Let's bring up our full screens of the Dow and job creation, because what is interesting to me here is we're talking about the unemployment rate and job creation. It tends to go in a yearly pattern, which is to say, you look at 2010, 2011, 2012, the highs and the lows are they're in parallel. This is what seems to happen every year. The question is whether the things that are happening in Europe and the fact that there will not be a stimulus in 2010 and 2011 and 2012 in the way that there were in previous summers is going to keep those numbers down, and how the president creates a strategy that will accommodate for that. I mean, that is it not, Jimmy, the big question? No matter how much sort of playbooking you do, no matter how much strategery you have in place, there are some unknowns that could really derail his best efforts.
There are always, listen, Friday's numbers were a huge blow. It was a definite game change to a large degree. But that doesn't mean that next month they're not going to be better. I mean, we go into the summer months, and what happens? Kids get hired, et cetera, et cetera. I look at the second chart that we had up, the tracking job creation. When Barack Obama took office, the economy was losing 700,000 jobs a month. Last month, we gained 69,000. 69,000 jobs a lot? No. It's larger than most small towns in America, population-wise. But when you go from losing 700,000 to gaining 69,000 or 100,000 or whatever the number is, that's a positive thing. Talk about that. I get defining Mitt Romney. I get there are going to be things that are going to be thrown at you, whirling dervishes, et cetera, et cetera. But talk about, run the negative ad, and then run what you're going to do.
Well, see, I think this is where perhaps the gulf between you and Joy is not so wide, and it's a matter of aesthetics.
We're never booking them.
This is what I'm saying. In other words, you've got to tell what you've already done. You're not asking for new policy. You're asking for the revelation of, when I was at the Aspen Institute, Bill Clinton came up to me and says, look, you got to get your guy to tell the story, to present the narrative of what's going on here the way I've just done.
Sure.
And Bill Clinton, until being recently off message, was certainly on top of that, right? was certainly on that, right?
It's also a trap for any incumbent. When you say, in my next term, this is what I'll do, the challenger could say, why haven't you done it? You had 4 years. That's a tricky thing to get out of. Now, Obama actually is trying to get out of this trap. He started with a new line on Friday that hasn't been picked up but seems important. He says the Republicans have been in this fever. They used to be for campaign finance. They used to be for environmental reform, and they've gone crazy. But if I win, they'll stop going crazy, and we'll be able to get things done. Now, I don't actually think that's true. I think they'll continue to be crazy. Yeah. But that's his argument that he can make if he needs to go to the public. That's what he's going to try to do. But it gets you into a tricky position of if this needs to be done, why hasn't it been done yet?
It's the do nothing Congress argument, right? He's doing a combination of.
And we will be talking about obstructionism versus leadership in the next block. But first, we want to take you to a live look at London, the site of Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee. We are just getting some breaking news in now. Buckingham Palace says the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, has been taken to the hospital with a bladder infection. We will have a live report with the details next.